So welcome to winepilot.com, and today we are doing a preview of the new Penfolds releases. And this is a pretty exciting day for a lot of Australian wine drinkers when Grange comes out, and you know, a lot of people are talking about, is this a great vintage? Is it a good vintage? And today we're going to taste through, you know, a handful of new Penfolds releases. And normally some of us would fly to South Australia, we'd taste these wines, but Penfolds, we haven't been able to do it this year. So all these wines have been sent to our homes for us to taste. And we're very lucky to be here. So today, the group of us, we're going to just taste the wines. We're going to discuss them and just have a bit of banter as we normally would at these kind of tastings, which is really what we do. So firstly, quick introduction of the fantastic people we have here, some contributors to winepilot.com. We have Jeni Port, who is the longest standing wine writer at The Age, which is, fantastic wine writer, which it's great to have her here. We have Erin Larkin. Erin's written for Gourmet Traveller Wine, written for Halliday's Wine Companion, The Post, fantastic wine judge and wine writer as well. We have James Atkinson from Drinks Adventures. Drinks Adventures, if you don't know it, it is Australia's leading Australia's leading podcast in the food and drinks category. So, you know, it's great to have James here. Everyone sign up to Drinks Adventures because it's a fantastic podcast. Tony Love, 10 years as the News Limited national wine writer. Great to have you here, Tony. Kenny Gargett from the great state of Queensland. How long did you write for Courier Mail, Kenny?
15, 20 years. 15
or 20 years for the Courier Mail. We also have Melissa Moore next to me in Sydney. Melissa she's head sommelier for the Merivale Group in the eastern suburb in places like Hotel Centennial. So, you know, great crew here today. And the way we're going to do it is basically we've all kind of chosen a wine that we're going to talk about, and then we're just going to have a bit of banter, bit of Top Gear, bit of Margaret and David style, talking about the wines. But to begin with, we're going to speak to Ken, because Ken was the lucky one of the lucky ones amongst us. Tony was as well, getting to see 18 wines, getting to see the whole Penfolds selections. And Ken, what do you think about this year's Penfolds releases?
I thought as a collection across the board, it's as good as I've ever seen from them, I think. Not everything's perfect, but there were some unbelievably good wines. I think the Grange is phenomenal. I thought it was the best McGill I've seen. I thought it was the best 311. It's a wonderful Yatana. And of course, we'll get to the special bin later on. But yeah, overall, I thought it was just a brilliant release.
So some big talk there, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of discussion about that later. But we're going to start with Erin and the Bin 311 Delicious Chardonnay.
And Ken, I'm really pleased that you said that you thought the 311 was special, because on my page it was one of the greatest 311s that's been released so far. So when I opened it, I just took it straight out of the fridge and poured it. I didn't decant it or let it come to temperature or anything, and I think that it suffered for that, because on day 2 it had just come together in this svelte kind of polished package. It was spicy. There was really lovely stone fruit. I was a 95 on that Chardonnay, and I just think that's a really big call, but I'm really comfortable with it. And I looked at it over a couple of days. Traditionally, the Chardonnays from this Penfolds release are the highlights of the release for me. And so to start with the 311, I knew that we were onto something pretty special for the bigger wines. I was interested to see that the 311 was posited as the baby Yatana. I don't know if you guys saw that.
Yeah.
Is that a new comparison?
Yeah, I think they sort of tried the 389 was the baby Grange, so they thought they'd have a baby Yatana.
Right, that was my leading question. I thought that there was a real polish and a finesse to this vintage that I haven't seen in previous years. And so even though it was a warmer vintage and riper and all those things, it just had this like minerality and line that I loved it.
I agree. I thought it was way better than any other 311s that have ever been put out before. Any dissenting opinions?
Now, Angus, I'd never particularly liked 311, and maybe that's because you see 311 along with Reserve Bin A and the Yatana, and those two are always so far ahead of it that it makes it look pretty ordinary. And maybe if you looked at it by itself, it'd appear a bit better. But this time, I thought it just the best one I've seen by a long shot. Yeah. But apparently they talk about, I can't remember the 05, but that was the first one, and they talk about it as being a pretty special one as well.
But part of, I mean, the fruit sourcing, I think, is because traditionally there was a lot of Tumbarumba in there, and now I think Tumbarumba was number 3. So it was Tassie, Adelaide Hills, Tumbarumba. I've never been a massive fan of Tumbarumba Chardonnay myself, to be honest. And I just think that Tassie fruit just had this, so it was almost Chablis-like, I thought, in some ways. Like, it really had this purity and this focus and this, and I loved how, compared to the next one particularly, it was so reserved. It was so embryonic and youthful. Jeni, what about you?
Well, remember though, there is a different price point with this wine. It's $50. The others are considerably more expensive. Yes. I enjoyed it. I did see kind of similarities with the citrus was there, but there were similarities, I thought, with Riesling, which is your Chablis, I think. Beautiful aromatics coming through on that wine. Yeah. And just
Can I ask, you say, the different price point, which is correct, and this year at $50, it looks like good buying to me. Have you ever thought it was worth $50 in the past? Because I always thought it was way overpriced.
No. I'm not even 100% sure that it is $50 worth now, to tell you the truth. I don't know whether I would pay that amount. It is a lovely wine. I could see more.
You're a wine writer. You don't pay for wine.
Than others. I do care.
As the West Australian person here, can I mention that I am awash in a sea of West Australian Chardonnay most days of the week, which I think is a great honour. I love Margaret River Chardonnay. And so for me to say to you that I think in the best years, the Reserve Bin A Chardonnay numbers amongst Australia's very best is a really big deal. And I think that this has it is not Reserve Bin A or Yatana, but it has the hallmarks of that polish and that pristine sort of quality that make the very best Reserve Bins some of the greatest in the country. So,
yeah, I agree. Any other thoughts, Tones?
I agree with Erin in terms of its polish and its and there was a sort of glossiness to it. My notes immediately, this has elevated 311 into a sort of more top shelf kind of position than I've ever seen it before. I thought it was looking really great, and I was quite impressed by the whole package of that. I just thought there was a really lovely kind of zing, and the flavors were kind of twisting and turning as you were tasting it. I just thought it was a really serene, sort of smart wine, and it was a really lovely. In context, 3 Chardonnays in the group of Penfolds Chardonnays, and that was the first of the 3 in terms of value, etc. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah. So talking about serene Chardonnay, James, the Bin 19A, how do you see that one?
Yeah, the Bin 19A obviously being a single region Adelaide Hills Chardonnay. I mean, bridging out of that last discussion about the 311, it's sort of interesting hearing what everyone's saying, because I don't quite have the same context of having seen all the back vintages that some of the people here have. And for me, I really liked that wine. I found it a little bit lacking in generosity. And there was certainly plenty of that in the Bin 19A. On the nose, that wild ferment character straight up front, lots of that struck match. At the risk of offending Mr. Gago, it really brought to mind a particular beer style for me. I don't know if anyone's really drunk lambics before, but it's a particular style of Belgian farmhouse beer that's like open fermented with naturally occurring yeast and bacteria in oak barrels. And there's a bit of a sort of a farmhouse funk about this wine that I found really enjoyable. There's sort of smoky notes. There's some stone fruit characters that are a bit in the background. But then when it hits the palate, it's very full, much more generously fruited than the Bin 311, which I guess is the warmer vintage coming through. And then I guess there's this really pleasurable sugary lemon meringue and nutty character that I really, really liked. There's sort of some nice lingering acidity. There's a long and persistent finish. The other variable, obviously, apart from the vintage, is there's a bit more new oak in this year's than there was last year, but I wouldn't really have picked that personally. It's drinking really well now, and some people might mark it down for that. I was having a conversation with Angus about this earlier on, but I really like this wine. I gave it 95 points.
Lovely. I mean, I think it's I mean, it's like chalk and cheese. Those two wines, though, aren't they? One's embryonic, and one's like linear, and one's like, bigger and bolder and oakier. And I mean, I think both. I actually had even points for both those wines. I thought both those wines had different characters to them. I actually liked.
Outrageous.
What was that?
That's outrageous. Almost.
I know. Penfolds will hate me for it, but I think I found that a bit just because of the hot vintage. It was a bit heavier and a bit creamier, and I really liked it. A massive crowd pleasing Chardonnay. Like, you show that to any Chardonnay, anyone who likes Chardonnay with a bit of funk, they're going to absolutely adore that wine. Jeni, how did you see it?
I've got 95 points too, and I was only 93 on the 311, so that's the difference there. But
well, these Victorians know what they're talking about.
Yeah. I try. I will say that the one thing I got out of this wine, and I've made a note about it, is it has 80% new French oak. It has been slurped up by that.
Yeah.
The oak I found was beautifully balanced in the end. So that was a real feature for me, that this is a big wine. It's more generous. It has a lot going for it. The number of warmer vintages, and this is the Adelaide Hills in particular. And I just thought, wow, 80% new oak. I couldn't believe that. So I agree with all the other comments, but that to me was, the minute I saw that, I thought, okay, they've done such a fabulous job there. And the wine was up for it.
Yeah, and another just great example of like Penfolds, like I think someone's already said, they're doing fantastic Chardonnay.
I'd like to raise a slight dissenting note here, and that I thought the wine was delicious. I thought the oak was as Jeni said, amazingly soaked up, and my notes were it sort of had transformed into a kind of old school room, cedary, pencil casey kind of flavour component in the wine. My only problem with it, which kept my pointing at 94, was I found it was a little short, and I was quite surprised by that, given all the elements that go into making that wine. My notes are that it just felt a little short in the finish.
Tony, you do realise that 90% of people watching this have no idea what a pencil case is.
Well, I know, Ken, that you would.
Oh yeah. I had the first two Chardonnays at both at 93, and I thought the Reserve Benet was a good one, really good Chardonnay, but I didn't think it was Reserve Benet, what we're used to in the past. Because I look at Reserve Benet and I look at Yattarna, the two of them, because I tend to look at those more closely than I do the other one, because they're the two premium ones. And some years I find Reserve Bin can exceed Yattarna, other years not necessarily.
Yeah.
Recent years, Yattarna, I think, has been a bit ahead. I had Yattarna I had 97 or something, way ahead. It's a gorgeous wine. I didn't think that the Reserve Benet, as good as it is, gave what you expect from a Reserve Benet. I mean, Yattarna is that sort of well-structured, perfect, well-behaving school prefect. Benet is always that wild child. It's just, you get that funky, feral. And I didn't get anything like what I normally get. I like the wine, and I think it's a good wine, but I don't, if someone put that in front of me and said what is it, I'd have been stunned to learn it was a Reserve Benet. It wasn't what I was expecting at all. And this year, I thought Yattarna was a mile in front.
Show off.
Can I ask? Sorry, Erin, you go.
I was just about to ask about decanting and whether any of you decant the Chardonnays before you, like, okay, we just open them and try them, but do you end up decanting them because you like them later and see how they go, or is that just
I opened at 8 o'clock last night and just had a look at it again now. So and it's been kind of had a couple of sips during the day, so it's half a bottle now, so it's had a bit, not decanting, but it's had some oxygen. Jeni?
I open the way most of us, most consumers open wine. They open it, they drink it. That's how I taste, because that's how most people are approaching their wine. Now, after I've had the first taste, then I can, leave it out or even do some decanting and let some air in or whatever, but I always taste straight out the bottle first.
I had them, I looked at them the night before, this is last week or so, and nothing came out of the fridge. This house is cold enough. So I just looked at them.
For Brisbane.
So, this house is freezing, seriously.
19, 20, 21.
I'll tell you a story later.
No,
Seriously,
I
you will
don't.
not
No,
believe it.
no stories now, please.
I said later. And then I looked at them again 24 hours later before I spoke with Peter, and jotted down whatever I thought changes I'd seen. Most picked up a little bit. The one that picked up the most, I thought, was the Riesling. Others, varying degrees. One or two I thought may have gone into their shell a little bit, but so I looked at them both times, if that helps.
Interestingly, at the tasting at McGill with Peter last week, he now opens the wines up and pours them straight away. Even Grange, they used to double decant and do all sort of palaver with it, and now essentially they open it up, and within probably 20 to 30 minutes they're pouring them. So they choose to do, Jeni, like you do, essentially open them up and drink them straight away.
My question, obviously we want to get onto the reds, but my question to you that are very familiar with the Chardonnays over time is that have you seen them kind of going the more savoury route as are most Australian Chardonnays I see? I mean, you see all these beautiful savoury, almost with tannins, very mineral, very kind of, not austere, but definitely away from the bigger, richer styles. And do you see Penfolds Chardonnays going the same way?
With the Bin A, I've seen over the last probably 5 years of releases that Kim Schroeder, the white winemaker, and his team have pared back that struck match, sulphide-y kind of element in the wine. I mean, when they first came out with it, it was over the top. Sure. But over the last few years especially, and I know that this is a purposeful thing that they're doing, they are trying to pare that back to allow a little bit more of the fruit generosity to come into that wine. So they have got a specific, sort of design on letting that wine speak a little bit more of the fruit.
Yeah.
I think that they're making, quite rightly, a bit of a song and dance about their fruit sourcing, the quality of their fruit, the age of their vines in many cases, that they are, and always have to a degree, let the fruit sing. And I think it's a mistake to go too far into some of those savoury elements and to play into different trends. I think consumers expect Penfolds to a large degree to be beyond trends.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think because Peter's been now, there more than 3 decades, that protects it. And personally, I don't want it going that way. I have certain expectations of Penfolds. I think most consumers do. Yeah,
Penfolds is not trendy. There's no doubt about that.
One little thing about the Yatana that was also very clear was that was more this year, and I agree with Ken, it was unbelievably beautiful wine. But this year, it was more about the texture of the wine rather than the boldness of the fruit. And that was something that is a leap that they've taken with Yatana that I just thought has elevated it into something really superior in Chardonnay territory. Yeah. Ken, did you see the same thing?
Yeah, I just thought the finesse in that wine and the balance and the precision was just a beautiful, beautiful Australian Chardonnay.
Yeah. So Penfolds obviously best known for their red wines, best known for Grange. Time to move reds. And firstly, we've got Mel talking about the Kalimna, the Bin 28 from 2018.
So Kalimna for me is like, I was trying to work out whether it's like a second cousin or an uncle that you love and you don't see very often. It's a reliable name, that Kalimna. You think you know what's going to be in the bottle. Coming from restaurants, we tend to be this fairly snobbish about American oak. And with Penfolds, you're going to expect it, obviously. And I think that I'm always on high alert. But really with this, I loved it. I thought it was delicious. I thought it was like a really big, juicy explosion of fruits of the forest, oak in balance. Obviously, there's the sweetness from the American oak, but it was in balance for me. On the nose, it was the cocoa and the chocolate, all kind of savory, sweety notes. And on the palate, I thought it was super chewy, savory, fruit-driven. On initial, it was like dusty tannins, but they kind of grew on you. Yeah, I thought it was just a really delicious drink. I think if you spent $50 on that, you'd be happy.
And score?
Score, I think, for me, it was probably like a 93, 94 maybe. Yep. But I think that someone who buys Kalimna wants it to be like that, and they'll take it home that night and it will not disappoint.
I reckon this wine's going to be a little bit controversial. Dissenters, any dissenters in there? Mr. Love, you look ready to talk.
I will dissent a little bit purely in the context of drinking it next to the bin 128, sure. Which is the Coonawarra Shiraz. But I'll go back to Kalimna. 9 regions in South Australia, so it is, for me, it's just now a kind of a caricature South Australian wine, Shiraz. I don't see much in terms of regional import or regional kind of character in it, which is fair enough. It's just a South Australian blended Shiraz now. I loved all the little things in the middle with the chocolatey bits and the Kenoto and a chocolate mousse and all those kind of secondary elements. But I just didn't think it had a great personality in that sense. I just thought it was a thing they made to follow Kalimna, the name Kalimna, but it's not Barossa, it's 9 regions. I gave it 93 points as well, but in context, I gave the bin 128 Coonawarra Shiraz 95 points. I just thought that was a fabulous, cooler climate looking style of Shiraz. And I just thought it was a much more interesting wine in this release.
Yeah. What about you, Erin?
I was actually just looking at my note then to see what I wrote, and I literally wrote that the oak choice gives us a polishing body that makes it instantly recognisable as both Penfolds in South Australia, but it speaks of no specific place. So I thought it was very well done. It was high class. It's a style, no worries, beautiful. Not my style. I felt it was a bit much, but I was still 93 on it, which is very good. I mean, it's a brilliant wine. It just wasn't in my preference.
I found this wine a bit like fruity. I think it just suddenly, you just open your Chinotto, I think, kind of suddenly there's explosive blueberry fruits that was just kind of sweet. And to be honest, I was left a little disappointed by it. I only gave it 91. I just thought it was a nice, attractive South Australian Shiraz. But in terms of the line, this very proud line, I just thought it was not quite what I was hoping for, to be honest. But I mean, a warm year, obviously. And I think it suffered from that. What about you?
Kenny,
you seem to be like...
You're scoffing.
Losing.
No, I'm not scoffing. I would never scoff. I actually also gave it 93, but unlike Tony, my 93 meant I liked it. Last year, I remember... Oh, sorry, things going everywhere. Last year, I remember when we looked at them, I thought that was one of the better 128s I'd seen, and I had them both about par. This time I had... the 128 I thought was fine. It was down. I had it down at 89, but I had this at 93. I thought it was a much more enjoyable wine, more expression. Sure, it's not regional as such, but what Tony was saying really intrigued me because I get that same sort of attitude with 407. I just don't see the point of 407. It's all over the place. It's muddled. It's way overpriced, I think. But I know we're not talking about 407 at the moment, but to me, I thoroughly enjoyed the 28. I don't think we're talking about it, but if we were, the one I really loved of that sort of price range was the 138. I thought that was just a bottle of joy. I'd drink that every night. I think I had 95 or something for that. I just loved it.
I often like that wine. Very much.
Always like that wine. Exactly. It's delicious. Has there ever been a bad one?
Not to my knowledge.
No.
Well, I'll can you step outside, Ken, and I'll fight you on that one.
You didn't like the 138?
I didn't. I usually love 138. It's one of my favourite wines in the collection every year. This year, I thought it was nowhere near up to par. I thought it was a tough, hard struggle to drink.
Oh, Kenny. Oh, that's
you have tarmac for taste buds.
Okay, so we've had bin 28. Time to move on, I think, to bin 389, which is my wine, and the Baby Grange, 2018 vintage. I think it's 53% Cabernet, 47% Shiraz. I mean, this wine just screamed Cabernet, really, as soon as you opened it, that cassis leafiness just was like, boom. It was just so upfront, I think, this particular wine, and just exuded loads of kind of personality. And the region is McLaren Vale, Barossa, Padthaway, Coonawarra, Robe, and Rattenwoolley. So it's got a mixed bag of some, a lot of good regions in there. I found
Limestone Coast.
Limestone Coast.
Four of those are in the zone.
Exactly.
And it shows it.
No, I agree. It's got that little bit of eucalyptusy, minty kind of thing. Not in a bad way, I don't think, but I agree with that. And I found this to be a charming vintage of 389. I think a really kind of, an upfront, a generous vintage of 389. Is it that 1990 389 or 96 389 or 98 389, which are pretty exceptional wines with great longevity? I was a little unconvinced. I think I really enjoyed it, but it just seemed a bit upfront again. I think just some, I know I was trying to explain it to James earlier. I was saying, that's my cat, by the way, James, not yours.
Mine just walked in just before.
Yeah. But I just think great 389s have this lovely savoury palate. Like you get this fruit, but then you just get this kind of masculine, kind of muscular kind of palate. And I just didn't see it on this one. It was just a little bit more soft and supple. I really enjoyed it. 93 points, but I guess I was hoping for a little bit more too. Dissenters, I'm sure there's some dissent. Jeni, how are you on this one?
389 is always one of my firm favourites, and this to me was slightly disappointing. And the disappointment stems from that oak, which I think is at this stage, and this is when we normally taste 389 first up when they're released. And normally they're so intrinsically, beautifully melded fruit and oak. And it was not the case, I found, with this particular wine, that the oak is definitely overstating its presence here, more than usual. And I know oak is always a bit of a feature with 389, but it's always in balance. And the balance is missing in this wine. And I'm a little bit disappointed because this year commemorates the 60th anniversary since 389 was first made. And, it would have been nice to have had something a little bit super special.
Okay. Any dissenters on that?
I thought it was a very good 389, better than some of you guys, obviously, but I didn't think it was a great 389. I thought it was very good. It was one of the wines that did step up the following day. And I think that's what you're talking about with the oak and stuff, Jeni. You do see it come together over 24 hours. I know most people open it and drink it, but to me it was a better wine the next day, and it looked very good, but not. It's the ones you listed and a few others, the 10, the 8, and 16 I think was sorry, not 16. Yeah, anyway, it was a very good, not great 389.
Can I ask a question about this? Because it perplexed me. Because, Jeni, what you said before about Antony, about them opening and serving as they show you, that's what I did with this collection. And I found that technique sort of stymied me a little bit in my assessment of the wines. And so the 389 confused me when I opened it because the oak, as you say, I found it very dominant, and it sort of hid the fruit, which I wanted to see. And so I opened, and I have some left, which has been under gas. I opened the 2008 389 to give me a little bit of context on how the trajectory of it, to kind of get my head back in the game. And I did wonder, because the 2008, I can tell you, is looking absolutely glorious. And if you've got any, don't open it. But I did wonder about the state of this 389 when I put it up next to the 2008, because there was such majesty and grace in the 2008. And I found that the 18 just came to me in layers of like oak and then fruit, and then, it just wasn't cohesive.
We see normally 389, a really good 389, when it's released, the first glass, it is seamless.
Yep.
Okay,
it is beauty.
Yep.
And this wasn't necessarily seamless. It was sticking up, and you don't normally get that with a 389. I get your point about the age. Yes, it always ages beautifully generally, but that's the big tick. And it's the same with Grange for me. You're tasting it way too young, yes, but it's a really good example is always beautifully balanced.
Yeah, and I find the acid a bit jaggy on this wine, and you're exactly right. The balance of everything coming together, generally they are seamless, and there's this lovely kind of majestic structure underlying that lovely fruit.
And it's there from the start, isn't it? I mean, that to me, Erin, is the difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now time to talk about the big dogs. Saint Henri, and I know Tony is going to just. We should sit back and listen to the pros of Tony on this particular wine, because I think it's going to be something special. I think.
Well, thank you for that introduction. I just wanted to respond to something that Erin said on that last one. The 2008 389. It's so glorious. Don't open it. I love that. That's just such an ironic concept of.
I've got a glass, but don't you open one.
Well, I can tell you, I'm saving you from opening yours. It needs has time in it.
So the Saint Henri 217. So interestingly, most of the reds in the package in the collection are 18s, apart from the Grange, obviously. But this is a 217, so it is a cooler, wetter vintage in South Australia. 4 districts, Barossa Valley, McLaren Vale, Eden Valley, which speaks a little bit about the style of fruit they want, but intriguingly, Port Lincoln. Now, Port Lincoln, of course, is one of the great regions of Australian winemaking that we all know and love.
And Judy.
I have no idea where that fruit has come from there. It's probably one of the vineyards up on the hill above the township. So I'm just going to read my initial notes from the tasting, which is basically, okay, wow. To see this wine without any of the oakiness of its siblings is to truly see this wine. And I think in context of what we were talking about of the 389, I think that kind of sums up in a way what Saint Henri is generally, but especially I think this vintage. I just thought there was some beautiful dark, deep fruits, sort of rich plum and blackberry kind of fruits in it, but it also had that kind of roasted nut and coffee kind of element in the background. None of that kind of vanilla-y, creamy, biscuity stuff that you get out of American Oak New, all that sort of thing. So for me, the balance and the structure of this wine, it was an immediately delicious kind of drink. I just thought that the fruit swelled and then dwelled on the palate. It just rose and stayed up there as you drank it.
James and I talked about exactly that same thing today of that wine. You put it in your mouth and it just sat there. It just nothing. Whatever you did, it just sat there and lingered. And it seemed to, like a good Pinot, it seemed to even grow with time.
Yeah, I just thought, again, it was the classic power and grace kind of number. I just thought it was a really special Shiraz. And it's revered for all the right reasons. And I think this particular vintage really is a great vintage to look at it. And my other note, which I wrote, was I think a wine like this, within the context of all the other heavily oaked Penfolds reds, a wine like this is an increasingly relevant wine in the marketplace because it doesn't have that huge hit of oak and cedar and all the rest of it. It is a wine purely about fruit, and I just, to me, it was one of the highlights of the tasting at McGill, and I've gone all out on it, and I've gone 98 points.
Yay!
Wow.
Can I tell you that I'm really, really relieved and delighted to hear you say that, because it totally thrilled me, that wine, and I'm guilty of really profuse tasting notes, but my last sentence is a real beauty, and I was on 97, and the thing that I loved about it was the fruit sweetness and the prettiness and the elegance, and it just kept going. It was awesome. And I think even more so in context with the wines, as you say, with all of the oak, it just stood up as being this kind of like image of just beautiful Shiraz. And I just thought that's very relevant to what I like to drink. So I loved it. Really, really.
Jeni, I bet this was right up your alley too, Jeni, so to speak.
Yes. It's a wine that many of us kind of grew up with. It's kind of always been there. And I love the way that Peter Gago calls it Shiraz Unplugged, which is exactly what it is. It's, again, getting back to the fruit. I mean, this is the thing that we expect from Penfolds. They've got all the best resources, especially in their own state, and you want something like this. You demand it, you expect it. St. Henri, especially in Melbourne, as far as I'm aware, this is what people buy year in, year out, and have for decade upon decade. You can't fiddle with this wine, and they never have, and I hope they never will.
And it's it's a bargain. If you look at all the other wines, I just think this is the wine that you just kind of go, poor. If I had $120 spare dollars, I would. This would be what I would buy numerous bottles of.
Don't alert anybody at Penfolds to that fact, Angus.
Yeah.
And look, I think also it's interesting because, you take into context that it is that price differential from, in terms of Grange, for instance.
707, 169.
Yeah. So, but the interesting thing is, and I'm not at all privy to the joy of having a cellar like Ken does, where he's got St. Henri's going back 400 years. So
Jesus, I think he actually had the Jesus St. Henri as well.
The Jesus.
2000, the zero.
So, but I mean, all the stories about St. Henri, and Jeni, you may be able to sort of enlighten us on this, is that they age immaculately as well. So, so if you look at that price, you look at what it offers in an immediate drinking sense, and then you look at its pedigree in terms of cellaring. It's a pretty amazing wine, I think.
Yep, I agree. I was 97 points. I mean, I guess the question is, can the Grange be better than it?
Ken wants to say something.
Please.
Look, to be honest, and I can't put it in such poetic terms as whatever Tony said.
That's a given.
Whatever he said. I thought it was a very good St. Henri, but I didn't think it was one of the. I mean, it's not a 2010 or 2012 or a 90 or one of those wines that actually, in those vintages, matched the level of quality you got in a great Grange.
Yeah.
2010 St. Henri, for example. I mean, that you could drink that ahead of the 2010 Grange. I mean, they're both spectacular. I don't think the 17 you're going to do that. From what Peter Gago's saying, he thinks 18 will be one of those 2010, 2012s. It'll be one of those superstars. I thought this was very good. I gave it 94. I love the elegance. I love the silkiness, the length. But yeah, it just didn't quite excite me as much as some of them do.
Yeah.
And I know, Tony, I mean, you would have been there when the first one was released, Tony, so you'd have far more experience than the rest of us. But yeah.
I mean, I think what Ken's saying is it's pretty rather necessarily structural to some extent, but which I think is probably fair. But I just think it's so seductive.
I think it'll age for you've got 20 years or so with it. It'll be a beautiful one. And I really agree with the price. I mean, it's the one Penfolds wine that seems to be stuck in the mud when it comes to the price. Yeah. The others are going as fast as they can up the ladder. This one just sits there.
I'll edit that. I'll edit this little bit out of the video. I think we don't want them finding that. So
yeah, I've got a feeling they know.
I think they know.
And it puzzles me why it's done that. I mean, do they not have the market that they once had for it, or I don't know. I mean, I'm curious to know.
They probably want to keep an insider wine. They want to keep a wine. Obviously, 407, 707, Grange, RWT. They get a lot of elephant game hunting collectors coming in for those.
Why would you? Yeah, I'd shoot it too. I mean, it's 407 and St. Henri are not far apart now, and 407 is more expensive than 389. I mean, I spoke to Peter about this, and he was saying they get no complaints about price, and they sell all they make, and they could sell a lot more. So far be it, you can't argue with that. But yeah, I think.
Now talking about price, Jeni Port, the latest Grange is $950. So the question is it worth it?
They're aiming, aren't they?
Four figures.
They've last year was 900.
Yeah.
This is 950. Last 2 years were 900. This is 950.
That's right.
What about next year? It's going to hit the 1,000 point, I reckon.
The only people who discuss this price thing are us. People overseas, they don't get into this thing about the Grange price. They just see it as the great wine of Australia, or possibly Hill of Grace, and they don't get into this, oh my God, it's gone up another $50. It's one of the world's great wines and deserves to be priced accordingly.
Yeah.
Sadly, I can never buy the thing, but, you know.
All right. Erin?
Can I just, a really quick sentence about that is I raised this with my wine group the other night, not in the context of the 2016 Grange, but about the price creep with Grange in general. And one of them stood up and said, which I really agreed with, he said, it is Australia's only true luxury wine product. And I love that they're increasing the price because we look good for that wine. That wine overseas is a brilliantly loved and highly purchased wine, and get it as expensive as it can be. Yep. I mean, as a drinker and a purchaser, I don't want that, but as an Australian image, I'm okay with it.
I think your friend's being harsh on Hill of Grace. I think that sits there as well.
But there's less of it. But it's not. There's less of it.
Well, that may be, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's less Petrus than there is Mouton.
Enough about the cash, Jeni. Tell us.
All right, sorry, I did point out that I should have left it alone. Clearly,
you were asked by Angus.
But I did think I can see it going up. Let's face it, it's heading towards the $1,000.
Yeah.
Is it worth it? I don't have the money for it. Doesn't mean much, does it? It is probably worth it to a number of people who can afford it. I worry why they buy it, but that's their business. And I worry whether it is just an investment wine for some people. But again, that's their business. So we're going to talk
very quickly before you do that. I know that we get into this, is it worth it thing, but it's almost like saying, is it $20? I mean, I can remember I was doing the Courier Mail at one stage and I'd done these $10 wine or $15 wines or something. And one of my friends, my mother's friends was over visiting her and I happened to be there. And she said, oh, I just wish you'd write about some value. You know, the $7 or $8 wines that we like to drink. And she drove away in a 7 Series BMW, and I thought, for God's sake, seriously, it doesn't matter whether it's 20 or 1,000. It's a question of, is it worth it,
and can it sell?
Yeah, and Grange sells out, so you can't say it's not. It is to some people. I mean, I don't think we should focus on this value cost. I think we should look at what the wine's like.
Tell us about the wine. Tell us about the wine.
Okay, it's 2016. It has 97% Shiraz, 3% Cabernet, in keeping with previous releases, $950. I found it interesting that there are only 4 major sourcings for it: Barossa Valley, McLaren Vale, Clare Valley, and McGill Estate, which is the same as the 2015 sourcing, but minus Coonawarra. And if I get to talk to Peter, I will definitely raise why Coonawarra is being sideways there. Is that
sidelined?
Sidelined. 14.5% alcohol, on the generous side, but again in keeping with previous releases. Okay, 18 months in American oak hogsheads, 100% new. Okay. We got some warmer vintages, or warmer vintage here from certainly McLaren Vale, but outstanding vintages, I think, all round. Okay, in general, I would say it's a finer edged, more elegant Grange that retains the usual degree of Grange power, but is far from muscular. I think some of the releases, going back 5 years or so, were and have been quite muscular. They appear to be overbearing to me. And it is a powerful wine, but it doesn't have to be overbearing and in your face. Yeah. This is the opposite of that. I've written pretty about 3 times, which is always a good sign for me. In 1990 vintage, I wrote pretty about every second word, and it's still one of my favourite Granges. Lifted bouquet, very pretty. Bit of dark chocolate, black olive, loaded spice, cinnamon and nutmeg, orange rind, a powerful presence of aniseed and licorice strap. That is quite a strong element in that wine. Fruits are as black as night. American oak, as usual, is up to the task of matching the rich, ripe fruit, but I note that there's a lighter hand behind it this time. The winemakers are dealing with a more elegant vintage, I think, and it has been adjusted accordingly. 18 months in new American oak hogsheads rather than 20 plus, because in some previous vintages, we've seen, you know, a pretty substantial level of time in new oak. Beautifully balanced all round. Palate has that lightly smoked meat, which I always kind of like, that charcuterie. Spice plays a huge role, I think, here, together with those ripe black fruits. A touch of thyme, bit of bay leaf. Tannins are fine and unforced, and I was reading Peter Gago's comments. He describes them as solid and malleable. I don't know whether I'd call them solid tannins, but he's the winemaker, chief winemaker.
And chief poet as well, I believe.
He's
the
way
Penfolds
more
poet.
poetic than me, I admit.
Yeah.
It is intrinsically, essentially Grange with a lilting South Australian beauty. I mean, we talk about Grange all the time as Australian, but it's always South Australian. And I think from that point of view, you've got some really older vines coming into play here, some warmer areas in that particular vintage. But still the Barossa Valley and the Clare Valley in particular, I think, have a big role to play in this wine. 98 points.
Boom. Delicious. 98 points from me. Erin?
98 points. I loved it. When you talked, on the first day, I thought the oak was quite present, and the fruit power is an indisputable sort of thing, but I really found that the oak dominated both the nose and the palate. But on the second and third day, I just found that the true nature of it was totally revealed. The oak had sunk into the fruit. It was really like the Rolls Royce had kind of swung around to pick us up again. It was really svelte and complex. It was everything that I wanted. A really kind of imposing fruit profile, mulberry, raspberry, blackberry. It was just everything. I mean, whether or not you like it or whether or not you like that style is completely irrelevant, because you absolutely have to agree that the quality of that wine is just top notch. It was beautiful.
Kenny is just
I agree with all of this, except I just don't. I mean, to me, if you don't give that wine 100 points, what the hell do you give 100 points to? If you don't give that wine 100 points, you have less heart and soul than the White House. It is absolutely just, I think it's the best young Grange I can remember seeing for decades. It's
wow.
Brilliant. Brilliant wine.
Oh.
Heathens if you don't give it.
Tough Tony?
Ken,
our South Australian local expert.
Yeah. Now, Ken, far be it for me to agree with you. To agree with you.
Oh, really?
But I think what the point you raise about this, and it's a discussion I've actually had with PG and a few other people in McGill a few years ago about another wine, is how do you point wines like this? You know, I mean, do you point them upwards or do you point them downwards? Like if you start at 100 points, for instance, what are you taking off a point for, and another point and another point? Or if you're starting at 90, what are you adding points for? And it was a really interesting discussion. I have given it 99 points, and it's probably because one always feels like 100 means perfect, and I don't know what perfect is. So I think it's a kind of a philosophical discussion once you get to that point. I just want to put it in context with the 2015 Grange released last year, which I thought was dense, heavy, hard, yakka, and I think if you dig a little bit deep with Peter Gago, he was sort of alluding that in comparison to the 15, this was a delicious, really pleasurable wine. I thought the weight in it was right on the money. I thought there's no question about it that it's got depth and it's got balance and it's got, all the things that are going to make Grange go forever and ever and ever. Maybe that one point that I took off was about the oak. I thought the American oak in it was maybe just a little standouty, but one expects that in Grange. And I think also a discussion I did have with Peter on the day was a discussion about VA in Grange and how VA is part of the DNA of that wine. And I felt there was I had an immediate notice of VA, that sort of formic kind of character when I tasted that wine. And I think it is part of the pedigree of the wine. Did it stand out a little bit? Maybe, but I think once you start drinking and start tasting it and you have it in your mouth, that kind of dissipates a little bit. But I just thought it was a wine of exquisite beauty and depth, and I loved it. I loved it.
I think that's, yeah, absolutely. And I agree with what you say with the points. Do you go down or up? It's not easy, but to me, if it's can I ask? I actually thought everyone it'd be like sort of the ice rinks or whatever. Everyone would hold up their 10 at the same time. Is there a Grange from this century that when it was released, someone thinks is better than this one? I'm just out of interest. I mean, I think there's some 10s, 12s, 8s, 4s, 2s, all great.
4 and there, but maybe 4 and 10 for me, just a little bit more seamless, I think, and just so. And I think of like the special bin wines, I often will go higher because I think that Cabernet with that structure just adds a bit more. I don't mean class is probably not the right word, but just a bit more subtlety to the mix is how I see it. And that's, for me, it's just, if you are looking at the great wines of the world, and I'm not saying this isn't one of them, but just it's still brutish. It's still Australian brutishness. Yes, there's an elegance to it, and Jenny's perfectly right. There is an elegance to this as a vintage, but I think it's, for me, I just want a touch more finesse to it, I think. What about, Mel, from a sommelier perspective, how does this wine fit in?
Well, interestingly, we don't tend to see them fresh off the bottling line, or so to speak, if you like. I think as a complete wine, it's delicious, but I don't know how many people are tasting it like this when at 4 years old. I think that we see them at 10 and 20 years, and they're such status symbols and prestigious wines, not necessarily that people are drinking for drinking's sake. It's such a prestigious thing, so they're revered as such. But and you could be drinking a corked one. Obviously not you would with the Penfolds clinics, but I don't think people would really get it. But then you see the wine like this, where it's literally a 4-year-old baby, and I loved it too. I thought it was amazing, but I was expecting it to be oakier, more obvious oak. I think in the past, when I've seen new releases, they have been that disjointed oak versus fruit. But I think, I agree with Jenny. I think this is really delicious. I think it's delicious and in balance. And I look forward to seing it in 25 or 45 years' time, as it says on the notes.
I'd like to see it in 45 years' time too.
We're gonna need a lot of nitrogen for that, I think.
Sorry, Angus, very quickly. Tony mentioned the 15. I'm not sure whether you're aware or not, but the Rob Report recently declared the 15 Grange as the greatest wine of the year worldwide, which is not a bad accolade, given that they look at the pointy end fairly closely. I think this is better. I agree with Tony. I think this is a better wine. I like the 15, but this has just got more of everything in place. Just wonderful.
How about you, James?
Oh, look, I thought it was an absolutely stunning wine. Every time I came back to it and nosed it again, it just had more to offer. There were just layers and layers and layers of complexity going on. Just so much happening there. I gave it 97. Jenny, I was interested to ask you, with your comment earlier on. Well, Ken, I'm seeing your facial expression there. I haven't had the benefit of tasting. I haven't had the benefit of tasting every Grange since 1920.
James, no one takes any notice of those facial expressions.
No, but Jenny, I was just interested to ask you. You made the comment earlier that you really make a point of tasting the wines as the consumer will, and tasting them straight out of the bottle. How many consumers do you think are tasting Grange straight out of the bottle. I mean, I would argue that someone that's spending that kind of coin is going to be decanting, or is going to be at least a little bit aware of trying to get some oxygen into their wine before they judge it.
I'm not saying all consumers, clearly. It's interesting that you noted that Peter Gago has moved towards that area of kind of opening straight away rather than the 2 hours or more of letting it breathe. I think it's a good practice. Generally, that is how people drink their wine. They order it, they drink it, they buy it, they drink it. Well, I should say it also allows for those who want to decant it, and many will decant it, and I did decant it, or I will, when I finish tasting. It's been open now just in the bottle for a couple of hours. And I did that with the other wines too, but I have to approach it the way the people that I write for generally approach it.
Even Grange.
Yeah, I also want to know what it tastes like straight out of the bottle. And I want to know, it's the same policy with food. I always have the wine without food to start, always. And then I'll have food. I have to know the intrinsic quality of the wine as it is without all of those accompaniments and changes.
And I agree with that. I mean, I don't touch food when I'm doing this. And you're 100% right. I mean, particularly things like the Chardonnays, they'll be drunk within minutes of being opened. I'm not sure about Grange. I think James is right on Grange. That one, for example, and maybe 707 and the McGill and so forth, people will be a little more careful than that. But most of the wines, I mean, even 389s and all of those, people will be opening them and drinking them exactly as you say.
But I guess if you want to be consistent, if you want to be consistent and basically make sure you're judging everything by the same standard, the only way to do that is probably to judge them the second they come out, like Jeni is. Otherwise, how do you know what wine you're actually looking at? I don't know.
Well, that's what I mean. I looked at them when I opened them and looked at them, and then I looked at them again the next day, and I'd given the Grange 100 points when I opened it and looked at it. And then the next day I thought, well, hell, this is better. What do I do now?
101, go 101.
Yeah, it is. That's the problem, and seriously. And that's exactly what you're talking about with the points going up, going down. When I opened it and tried it, I thought, this is a 100-point wine for me. And the next day I thought, this is even better.
Now, you go, Erin.
No.
How many Granges have you given 100 points to off the bat? Just straight up.
Oh, God. I mean, I'd not that many. I mean...
15, 14, 13, 12.
No, I mean, 12, 10, I suspect. I'd have to check, but I suspect 8, 10, 12 would be close.
We're talking 5 or less in the history of
honestly can't remember. I mean, yeah.
Now, talking about exceptional wine, now, Ken and Tony, did you get the G4 as well?
I tasted the G4 in McGill last week, yeah.
There we go. So Ken got sent a bottle of G4 at home. So, you know, Peter Gago's clearly off all our Christmas card lists, except for...
the benefits of age.
Except for Ken and Tony. Well, maybe. Okay, fair enough. It could be a last vintage, let's be honest. So...
I think Jenny's got more to worry about living in Victoria.
Now, we don't talk about that. So, tell us, Ken, tell us about G4. Because a lot of people would have no idea what it was.
I've got to say, I was a bit surprised when all of the stuff arrived. It came in all these cartons and stuff.
In a container.
Pretty close. Poor old courier was running back and forth up and down the hill. And he brought in this thing, and I thought, why have they sent a Magnum? I don't need a Magnum to taste anything. It was like the Russian doll. You just keep opening. They had so many layers of protection. It ends up in this beautiful wooden box, everyone numbered. Anyway, this thing comes out. It's as heavy. It is one of the heaviest wine bottles I've seen. The punt, you can see the punt goes right up in there. G4. Basically, a few years ago, some may remember they released G3. And they didn't tell us a lot about G3. It was 3 vintages of Grange. I think it was the 8, 12 and 14?
Yeah, something like that.
Not 4. Yeah. It was, this is the 16. It was 8, 12 and 14, I think. And so G3, Grange 3, a blend of 3. It's non-vintage, obviously, because of that. They wouldn't tell us percentages, but they would say every vintage contributes a significant quantity in the sense that everyone's at least 10%. I thought that was a very good wine. I mean, I forget which Grange it came out with, but I remember I preferred the Grange.
Yeah.
I thought it was a good wine, but not, and it was $3,000.
I agree.
So there were only 1,200 bottles. Anyway, this time what was interesting was Pete was saying it's the second wine in the trilogy. They didn't tell us that the first time, but so they're doing a trilogy. Next year, they intended to release G5. Whether that happens because of the virus, who knows? But that'll be 5 different vintages of Grange. G4, it's 2,500 bottles, 4 different vintages of Grange, $3,500 a bottle. 2, 4, 8, and 16. Again, at least 10% of each. So the 16 is obviously out of barrel. The others are bottles that are tipped in. And look, it's obviously for the markets other than people like me and most of us here. It's for offshore at that sort of price, $3,500.
Speak for yourself, Ken.
Yeah, I'm sorry, of course. I should have you on commission. I thought, and I think it is a significant step up on G3 to me. I mean, if you look at the vintages, 2, 4, 8, and 16, it's got 4 of the great vintages.
It's no afterthought, is it?
Oh, overall, if I had to, I mean, look, I gave it 100 points as well because I thought it was just so fascinating, so interesting, so good. I didn't give the G3 that at all. I can't remember what it was, but it was down on that. Probably I would have, if you had to put fractions after that, I would have had the 16 Grange purely as a wine, you know, the proverbial bee's appendage ahead of it. But this one, what it's got is, because of those older vintages, you get that almost an extra layer of complexity. You've got some maturity almost in it as well, although it's still as fresh as you can imagine because of that 16. It's got incredible length, the structure, the silkiness. It's some of the, shall we say, slight criticisms that were offered to the 16 are probably not there because of that extra age has allowed all of that to dissipate and the good stuff to come through. Again, this wine will age for ages if you wanted to do that. I mean, I don't know what people are buying it for. Are they buying it as a collectible? Are they buying it to drink? Are they buying it for presents? Who knows? I suspect I'll never see another bottle, but it did hold up over a day or two. I can tell you, it was drinking absolutely beautifully the whole time through.
With spag bowl, it was just like absolutely perfect. What about you, Tony?
Yeah, I agree again, Ken. I thought it was a very, very special wine. Look, you know, what do you say about a wine like this? It's a curiosity. It's an experimental thing. It's an artistic license thing. What is it? I mean, 4 vintages. It immediately breaks rules that we all think are in our head about what a wine, you know, has to be when you're talking about elite kind of winemaking. But the thing which this wine blew me away was that having the 02 and the 04 and the 08 in it allows the time of those wines, that, you know, allows the maturity of those wines to come into this multi-vintage blend. So what you see is, what you might see when they're young wines by themselves is quite a tight, closed wine that you have to wait for many years to come alive. Well, now we see this wine that has all those in it, and the fruit has lifted and come alive over the time that these have been in the bottles. One thing interesting to point out, this is blended from the bottles. This hasn't been 2002, 4 and 8 that have been sitting somewhere in a tank under gas or anything for 15, 20 years or whatever it is. These are bottles that they've, you know, opened and put into the blend. So, Ken.
No, sorry. Well, what I was going to say, I think Erin appreciates some of this. You think of Krug and Bollinger. Bollinger in the sense that you've got the bottles going in as though they're reserve champagnes to go in. And you've got these, it's like using an awful lot of reserve material in an incredibly complex champagne. And you've got the foundation, the base vintage, if you like, is the 16, and then you're using these others as well. And I mean, I know Peter is very close to the guys aside from his own Tino champagne, he's close to the guys at Krug. And you can see, even though it's obviously nothing like a champagne, it's got that relationship. What you said about it being breaking all the rules, you're not expecting it. If you, it has been. You look at Vegas, Sicilia do Unico. Chapudia used to do their Le Pavillon as a non-vintage, but when I think it's Michel, when he came along, he hated that, and so he stopped it. But the old ones I saw, I thought were just fantastic old wines.
I think I agree. I mean, for those who are highly built into the wine culture, and we do know that these multi-vintages do occur. But this is obviously a show highlight. It's a showstopper. If you're into baking shows, you'd say, bring out your showstopper. Well, this is it. When I was tasting it with Peter in McGill, I talked to him about that element of that thing about the fruit coming alive, and he described it as the fruit has been liberated out of those bottles. Somehow it's been trapped in the bottles, and in this particular blend, it has been liberated. He also says it's a very counterintuitive style of wine because of exactly that reason. I just thought it was a very approachable drink. You kind of have no idea what to expect when you drink something like this, but I thought it was incredibly delicious. I thought it was a much better wine than the G3, like you can. I was like, for G3, it was what it was, but this has got something at a much more elevated level of beautiful winemaking in it. I just wanted to say also, I thought it was really fleshy and delicious and pretty and all those things. One thing I wanted to say also in my notes, I'll just read them out, is one thing I wrote, I don't think there's any need to point this wine. I just don't understand how you would point this wine, but, at 100, sure. I don't have a problem with it because it is actually a really delicious wine. I just hope that those bidding for it on the global market, I just hope they actually open the bugger and drink it because it is so beautiful to drink. And they just don't simply have a bottle on their shelf to brag about it or to, show it off, because it's simply a really delicious wine, and I really hope people get to see it and drink it and taste it, because it is something really special, and that's all I've got to say about it.
I think that's a bit of a teaser for everybody to go out and buy a bottle, buy one at penfolds.com. So
2,500 bottles, so double the volume of the G3, and an extra $500 on the price range. It doesn't matter at that level.
Did Peter tell you much about what they're thinking with G5?
No, it's. I think it is definitely. It's interesting. I did speak to him today, in fact, and he said he wishes that he could have the volume in stock of the 1978 Grange, because he would love to put that into one of these blends, but he doesn't have anything like the volume. You can obviously. He opens these older, the verticals of these all the time, so he knows what they would bring to a blend like this. But there's obviously got to be, it raises all sorts of questions about how much Grange is there sitting in the back in the Myriad for in the Barossa stores, that you can open up bottles and bottles and bottles of it. Each of them double digit at least. So like you said, minimum 10%. So who knows what the makeup is. I actually asked
46 packs. 40 cases minimum.
I asked, tell me today, and he said, I'm not allowed to.
No, he's not. Look, he told me that there'll be just a slightly elevated production of G5, not much. Beyond that, of course, he wasn't saying anything. And I said, well, if I'm allowed to sort of speculate, I would speculate 2018, given that it's such a great vintage for Penfolds, will be the base. Now, he didn't confirm or deny, but I'm still guessing that. The other thing I'd speculate is he loves 10. We all know he loves 10. We haven't seen that used yet. What do you reckon the chances are that appears?
We will
But,
see.
yeah.
Quite
Be the oldest one. Yeah, possibly.
Who knows? Who knows? I mean, I got no idea.
Well, I think that's a fantastic preview you've all provided to the wines, to the Penfolds release wines, which come out obviously 23rd of July. So I just want to thank you all for being here. Thank you all for giving up your time. Jeni Port in Melbourne, Erin in Perth, James about 5 minutes this way in Marrickville, Tony at the mouth of the Murray, Kenny in Vegas, Vegas, and Melissa next to me in the inner west of Sydney. Thank you all very much for coming. Kenny, as always, has the last word.
No, I don't want the last, but I'm just going to duck you because we get these cheat sheets and stuff, and they give some fairly flowery descriptions at time, but they've never, ever topped.
I think this is the perfect way to finish, Kenny.
Take it away. I'm sure you've all read it.
Take it away, Kenny.
This was apparently overheard. Petrichor aromas graduating to silkworm-eaten mulberry leaf.
Oh, fuck it.
I did look up petrichor, but I forgot what it was now. Absolutely no idea. Silkworm-eaten mulberry leaves. What if something else eats the mulberry leaf? That is priceless.
Peter Gago, poet in residence at Penfolds. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angus.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Angus.
See ya.
All the best.